Okay, let's see if I can do this any justice at all. For this is about the peopling of the earth. This is a geneticist right here, and he is speaking about the skull that's here on the left. And in his information and in their data, and after extracting the DNA out of it, they found that, ironically and oddly, that man's DNA still shows up today. It's not an archaic genetic signature in any way, but it is modern. Not just an anatomically correct human, which some people still are, by the way, and we'll get into that slightly with the reality of this. And he's going to tell this, but I'm not going to show it because I don't want it to get flagged. But he's found out 3 things, and that's what he's showing you here that point towards something. 3 things that tell you this out of Africa dichotomy that was forced on us is not reality. For there are ancient signatures and admixtures that some people have that other people don't have back before this time itself, and then the change that happens after that makes them quite different from each other. And it's not that exactly it comes out like a tree branch from one and spreads out as we are led to believe it, but archaic humans spread out to different areas, and a lot of different things happened, and it came with different outcomes. And I think we can easily see some of that today. For one group of these people have heralded mankind. They can fly now, and they've gone into space, and it's amazing what they've been able to accomplish. I can only imagine my grandfather being a youngster, for I remember whenever I was young and I would get into a seat next to him and tell me, "Grandpa, tell me about the good old days." And he would tell me how there wasn't even any cars in town, and when electricity got brought to places, when they had the first car and how it caused problems and stuff, but everybody and things changed and roads changed, and it was all for the better, but quite a change it was. And you can imagine the changes he went through because he saw that, radio, TV, and eventually he got to see people go into space during his lifetime. He wasn't much different than a Wagoneer, or maybe even perhaps a Roman, other than some of his clothing and some of his ideals and some of his knowledge. But the Industrial Revolution hit before he grew up, and he came out in the ending of that, and it showed quite a different outcome for him. I quite often look at just something like that, like, what would this person have to say about the world? Well, what would his dad say? Because he didn't know any of this stuff. He just knows what he knew. But as we compile and grow as a humanity, we find out things that's very exposing of the reality of everything. Science helps to do that, and science makes science. So he talks about this 3 things that he has that shows that actually there are different phases of humanity that happens simultaneously. And the DNA that they find from a 37,000-year-old European is actually identical to modern day Europeans. Now you have to get other knowledge to contrast with this to be able to get the reality and the scope of everything that would be able to be gleaned from this. But as a contrast, the Negroid population that is sub-Saharan, for one thing, most of us know they don't have any Neanderthal reaction ever in their lineage that led up to this point of the skull. that even though they had back to Africa migrations, they weren't involved in it. And we also know now the Sahara was green during that time and everything. When the Ice Age came down, everybody was forced down. So there's definitely a separation that we have there, that they didn't have connections. But also, Negroids from sub-Saharan Africa have a genome that's much like the Neanderthal. They still call it a ghost hominid because it seems to be something Homo erectus or a lesser form that they are bred back with in ancient times, perhaps pretty far back, and that maybe it changed them in that different way and inhibited them in a way that wouldn't have been for the Caucasoids that happened and basically all of the people of out of Africa. It's this Neanderthal signature is found in Indian and Denisovan people. It's found in American Indians. It's found in the Australians and the island people like Fiji and stuff. It's found in actually every one but them. And that's just one pointive marker that shows things. They also have this thing they found in their saliva, their spit basically, that it's called a MUC7 gene, and they're the only people that have it. And if they could find out which creature did have, or maybe has in any way come from it, they would be able to peg that out as to which one that it came from, whether it's Australopithecine or what it is. But they can't get a grasp on it, and the ones that they've checked in any genetics they can get, which is hard to get, they can't find it. The oldest Negroid skeleton, well, I'll show you that here shortly whenever we go into this more. Let's go back into Cro-Magnon DNA and the Caucasians of the European era and age. So you can see here in this picture, it shows you a Cro-Magnon type in this skull. Now the Cro-Magnon DNA sequence they pulled out of a 28,000-year-old was obtained from fossil bones discovered in the Palagigi cave in Italy. The results show that the DNA is identical to the DNA sequences of certain modern Europeans. The DNA sequence has remained static and unchanged for over 28,000 years. It is not a thing, and this is one of the three things that that guy was pointing out. It is not a thing that it's rapidly changing or overlapping in any way, but it has been static for that long. There have been minor mutations at most. People talked about them when I was a kid. Whether or not you have hairs on the very first knuckle, your middle knuckle of your fingers, basically on that top one right there, you know? Do you have hair on that knuckle or not? Whether your earlobe's attached and things like that were certain markers. And of course, see, this is something neat. This is not something you could find skeletal. And so if you ever found a skeleton, you wouldn't have seen those changes. So there can be radical changes that aren't seen in the skeleton, that's more in the flesh forms and so on. But the DNA sequence has remained static, though, and unchanged for 28,000 years. This means that Cro-Magnon was a fully modern individual who perhaps at that time, too, had a larger cranial capacity. Right? And then, so re-examining the out-of-Africa theory, they figured out that there is no way the Caucasians came from Negroids, or that we actually have a common thing other than far, far back as being similar. And then it changes and deviates. Now, this is not meant to be a racist thing, although I keep getting told by blacks they were the first people and they did this and they did that and stuff jealously on my site. But so this is the reality of it all. And you can say reality's racist if you want to, and all kinds of things, but out of checking 7,556 haplogroups of 46 subclads and 17 major haplogroups, and they're considered, and the finding is that European haplogroups did not descend in any way from African haplogroups or Negroid haplogroups A and B. And it's supported by the fact that the bearers of the European haplogroups as well as non-African haplogroups do not carry this incredible range of SNPs. And it shows you that this thing happened in this out of Africa was a whole different generations, and it's not even Recently they found a jackal and a wolf, and they always thought they were both jackals, and they found out, no, this is kind of more of a wolf. Like a coyote's real close too. And we're saying that it's close. And you can tell, morphology, it's close. But a wolf is in no way a German Shepherd. But you can see it's close. But if I say Doberman, you can tell it's nowhere near as close. And I start saying Greyhound, and you're like, oh no, see, things get deviated to points. Right? So seeing that has still been going on for that long, when we're led to believe whenever I was a kid and about modern things, that we had something along the line of 4000 BC, we suddenly made a jump. But what they can't show in the genetics in any way, shape, or form, how a similar to a Negroid type person ever came out of Africa, and that Negroid type person ever magically morphed into a Caucasian. There's been things said about, lesser light and vitamin D3 and all those things. No. It has nothing to do with that. Genetic sequencing has shown that a projective genetic sequencing, which is still somewhat burgeoning, but they've got a decent idea of it, that the light-skinned genes go back some 60,000 years. And Cro-Magnon burials have been found where they've dressed up, and they are not too far from Romans and things of that style. The thing that they're missing is metalworking. And you think they're missing boats and things, but they're not. For we've shown recently, people are getting around in boats, and somebody got to Australia 50,000 years ago, and boating comes in much earlier. And these extravagant burials that they have, and the Tarim Basin mummies that they show with this extravagant fabric work so early of these Caucasians that are all the way up in the edge of China, where they have all these pyramids that they won't go into, and it's of course political, like whenever you find what may be an Indian mound and it's political, you can't get into it. But surprise, the ones that they've been able to sometimes aren't showing the actual Indians you think it is, and in strange times it is an Indian, but you never knew it was a Pawnee, did you? They're way away from here, and it reveals things for everybody. We try to do it out of respect as much as we can, but somebody's got to find out the history of it all and build the future of it all, and they're in the middle of it right now. It'd be great if the world would help them instead of hating them so much. Those Tarim Basin mummies have shown a lot of things and revealed a lot of truths to it, and the extent of Proto-Indo-Europeans and what people thought of Mongols and all this thought that we have been taught to believe. But where is it in this out of Africa theory that supposedly someone changes from looking like this to looking like this? Or is it possible one person type of an early hominid like Homo erectus developed quite differently than other ones, like these dogs we're talking about? Because you look at a mammoth ivory carved-faced at 24,000 BC, and you can imagine the erosion on that, but how good it would have looked even that age. And I've shown you some pieces recently, and the Lion Man goes back 40,000 BC and things, but look at the extravagance of that carve and what that shows. I mean, there's that in the cave art shows you in of itself a lot more going on. And like I always say in my videos, it said we were Ugg 4000 BC, and I through time figured out it goes way back much more than that. And even whenever these researchers are looking at it and they're talking about it like Ugg, and they always seem surprised, and it seems like they're even more advanced than they're willing to even go with. And it's taken some 35 years to people to think of them as 100-mile-an-hour people, as opposed to somebody that was jogging, if you will, in a picturesque way. But there are no real connections between this and this that go back for if you look at their genomes and how much is shared, these little bitty pieces right here, chip, 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 match up to this. This is Africans, but it means Negroids, really. It's not talking about North Africans that were endemic all along, and Egyptians and out of there, and Middle Easterns. We're talking sub-Saharan. First is Europeans and Chinese, which are extremely close together. And the pink that is enveloped under this and built into both are Amerindians. And so, well, we know how that happened, and people, no matter what with the ideas, if you want to just say they made it across the Bering Ice Bridge, but might have been somehow mixed to something. But, they weren't Negroids at all, and there's this disconnect, and it's pretty easy to see. And whenever I was growing up, of course, you knew they were sub-Saharan African, and they were separated down there for so long, just like Aborigines had been, and they were quite different. But in a modern day, they're, instead of still going with that and going with everything, and hey, India, aren't they neat, and Eskimos, wow, they're trying to force a directive as they try to force people together. It's a directive that's kind of United Nations bound in something, but it doesn't show too much reality with what you think that you were going to do. I mean, if you make a zoo exhibit, there's only certain things that you can put together, and while you want to put like things together, you don't want to hybrid something that isn't normally a hybrid. And you sure don't want to be forced on it and have directives and have news and media and add mixed couples shoved in your face like hell. Getting black people to believe one thing and whites, or whatever group you show. So, scientists collected for years all of this data, but what we don't get known is the truth of it all, and somebody compiling it and coming out with it and showing it in your face. They talk about little bitty things, and if you're not in the know, you aren't even making connections. And if you are even in the know and you aren't looking at data with certain aspects on it, you aren't going to even be trying to find it. Right? But Svante Pablo, which is very famous in genetics and stuff, has brought genetics into the equation of what we were talking about a long time ago, and how there's not only Neanderthals, but or Homo neanderthalensis, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and these variations on a theme that had gone out of Africa, and their interaction and re-interaction after change and back through each other caused a series of changes that's really exclusive to them, as well as in sub-Saharan Africa, they were having things and hominid integration that was exclusive to them. We're going to see this museum here, and it's going to show the exhibits of some of the early primates leading into modern man, and the ones out of Africa that they have and that they've tried to push and say that we all come from. And you can see the phenotype and the way these people look somewhat, and variations on a theme, and somewhat of an evolution to a different type of people. And then there's this one. And when we have this one, that's different. Well, the last two we looked at were also different too, and I think you can realize that. But not as different as this. One of these things is not like the other that we've already seen. And he had formed out of this type of group. I've always thought they have a strange depiction of him. He gets a haircut, but it's only across the middle of the top of his head. It's not like he's going bald. It's like they only cut the top of his head. Not too good at it. They'd probably ball it all up and chop it all off. Not giving him a scalp, but whatever off of it. But so whenever you go through things like this, there's logic that's got to hit a certain point with somebody. And you can say that I can see an Asiatic, Oriental type in that. And I can see much more Caucasian features than those others. Right? But there's one thing that logic gives us. It gives us the ability to discern truth. And we have something simple like A plus B equals C. And A is not C, B is not C, and C is neither A nor B, but A and B make C. As in genetics of your children, things along that line. But you can use this in all kinds of ways, right? But let's take it even a simpler point than that, if we can. A and not A cannot simultaneously exist. What? Oh, well, they can, but they cannot be considered the same thing. A and not A cannot simultaneously coexist as being considered the same thing. If you follow me. And there are variations on a theme of what you would even call a Negroid type. There are pygmies that people have all but forgotten about. They're quite short. And there's a pygmy form too, and we found that hobbit in the islands and stuff. But that's a different form. The Negritos there, even though they're darker skinned due to Denisovan admixture, aren't related to them. I've done a video about Negritos because I was told to, because some black person was trying to claim all of them. And here's one right here. Just some 3 foot. I love the expressions they put on some of them. Shows you an artistic license that kind of gets somewhere, but there is no way that something eventually that evolved 1, 2, 3, 4 steps and ends up looking like this is equal to the thing that we just looked at that looked more Caucasian Asian and took 2 more steps than it, and 2 more steps 37,000 years ago, or whatever the date was on that we're doing exactly for that genetic so we can verify, are still extant today. Now, the strange relating of that, though, is that we're told to believe that somehow, if you were to just take someone from sub-Saharan Africa and let them live in Sweden for a few thousand years, that they would all of a sudden become a Nordic type or a Caucasian. And that's not the way that it works. In fact, you could never get there again, because the hominids that they have integrated with them are different than the ones that were done for the ones that are here. And the ones that are here no longer exist, and the ones for here no longer exist. And so it can't happen that way. You'd have to have that same integration and be able to take out the regression part that happened in here. And you can't. Just the same that you can't say that Orientals and Chinese people are the same as blacks. Can you tell a difference? What's the major standout feature in this is prognathism. It's where all of the lower jowl sticks out a little bit more than they would on somebody else. And it's not an underbite and an overbite, but it's due to farming and efficient hunter-gathering in things that we can see even in Cro-Magnon times, and how it had gone away. What was still left in these primitive Africans that are still extant today in Africa. It's not anything new. Now let's look at one information here. Or if we simply look at the Negroid race, And you can read this farther than I'm going to go right now. They'll tell you that they are populations of sub-Saharan Africans, and that they have come out since then, but they were sub-Saharan Africans. And it's pretty much where the dark brown area is here. The gray area at the top of North Africa and Egypt, even into the Horn, was always Caucasians, all the way through, everybody. And different colors is different forms. But they tell you that they thought at original times that actually they were extremely related to the Islander people and the Australians and the people of Irian Jaya and stuff, but genetics have shown that they're quite different. And here's another look at ranging here, where Capoid is, like you would say, Khoisan. Mongols, of course, are in the Asiatic form, and Australoids, right? And so you can see North Africa was always Caucasians in the elder race, and according to the Pleistocene. So way back when, and blacks keep trying to say they were here, and they were right down here, and they weren't in Egypt or anything, and they didn't have anything to do with North Africa. And as the Sahara became a boundary, that even defined it even more. But the oldest, so Carlton and Coons had figured out different ones in Capoids. That's that purple area. And so here's some interesting information. Afrocentrist author Cheek Anta Diop, who black Afrocentrists love in America, contrasted Negroid with Cro-Magnon, some 37,000 years difference, in his publications, arguing for Negroid primacy, which was weird, and Grimaldi Man, which shows the skeleton right there, down there at the bottom, Upper Paleolithic fossil found in Italy in 1901, had been classified as Negroid by Boole and Vallas in 1921. And while that was true, and they thought that he was some type of cross, because back then they were trying to push an idea of people changing and twisting, and they thought they had found some twister. And the truth of reality is that once they checked the nasal slit and other things and other people, they totally discounted it. By 1927, it was totally gone, and the identification totally was obsolete by the 1960s, as they had it all figured out, but was controversially tried to be revived by Diop in 1989, and totally dismissed. In the context of the first peopling of the Sahara, there was a debate in the 70s whether the non-Negroid mixed or Negroid fossils found in the region were older. And the reality of it is Asillar Man, a 6,400-year-old fossil discovered in 1927 in the Adar Dres Ifogas near Issouk, now which is near Kidal region of Mali, was claimed as the oldest known anatomical modern human skeleton of Negroid type. That's modern, and they haven't found one older yet, so 6,400, so it's really about 4,400 BC. Not too much before the actual Egyptians were going on, but they even noticed the difference between Nubian A and Nubian C colony drastically, and there's information about that. But different variations and stuff. Well, before that, they were considered, any skull that we have found is considered proto-Negroid, meaning that it wasn't quite modern at that point. And when we're comparing that, Cro-Magnon at 37,000 years was already, well, it's still alive today, basically. And you can see the radical difference in the amount of evolution that had happened and different things that happened to different people in different areas. And what we can glean out of this is that while we can say we had some common ancestor way back when, so much had happened even way back when that they weren't even connected anymore by the time that we were looking at the ones that are the recreations. Definitely not. And then there was variations happening on a theme there. For Khoisan aren't related to sub-Saharan Negroids, related to Nilotics. But ironically, all the Caucasians seem to have gotten back together, and they are variations on a theme, but extreme close variations on a theme. And on a modern microscope, you would see Arabs who had an Islamic slave trade and had a lot of integration, and so they've lost some of their lighter hair features. But These same geneticists have figured out that the light skin gene goes some 600,000 BC and was a blanket over humanity, or what we called humanity at the time of 60,000 BC. People don't usually try to put A and B and C together, but one thing's for sure: you can't have A and not A simultaneously, and then later have another form from that and still try to claim them as being the same thing. Not that they should go around reclassing humanoids and Homo sapiens or anything like that. But we should be more correct in the way we talk about things, for if we don't, we're screwing ourselves out of the knowledge that we could be gleaming out of the reality of truth. And in a modern PC world, it seems like we're directed to stare at a bar of soap and call it a cheeseburger. Don't you see it? That's a stupid thing I just said, but that sometimes to me shows how stupid it seems things they are pushing on people. If you don't have any idea, you get misdirected to believe all kinds of things. But the peopling of the world is a lot more complex than that simple out of Africa idea that's really been dead for decades now, guys. And they still don't teach it in books because they want to keep their directive idea going. They thought that sounded like happy family much more than the reality of it all. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And we'll get on to another one. Appreciate you.